This is for you.
Oh, cool. That was
I love
like a
that
fun
we
mic.
both have really bold
Right,
eyeshadow.
I saw you from a distance. I was like, that's so pretty.
Thank you. So today I am speaking with Tati Gabrielle about her new DC film. I noticed that your voice has a very high pitch when performing this character. Was that a conscious choice or perhaps something you were directed to do to really create a character that's a child when you yourself are not a child?
Right. Yes. It was definitely intentional to make her that youthful quality still be very felt, especially in contrast and sort of juxtaposition to what Kylie feels internally, which she's very tough. She's sort of been hardened by life. But you know, how hardened can a young girl be? So she still had to have that lightness about her.
And one of the things that I noticed immediately was that your character is Asian, and you, as a fabulous Malaysian actress,
thank you.
You're starting to get more opportunities to play characters that have Asian heritage. So what has that meant for you personally, professionally, and do you maybe have any aspiration to expand beyond acting so you can really create more of those opportunities that the industry is too slow to give you?
Yes and yes. So this means it means the world to me. I mean, that was one of the first things that drew me to Kylie. I was like, oh yeah. Like, absolutely, I get to like, for me, like, with my Asian half, like, I mean, my mother's, like, my superhero, and it's always been a priority for me to champion her and to carry her legacy, so if whenever I get that opportunity to do that, I'm always there for it. And yeah, I'm actually looking into, like, producing and stuff now, so yeah, look out for it, and to do exactly that, to be able to tell the stories that aren't being told, and especially in the way that I think a lot of the API community wishes that they were told. Yeah, and then create opportunities not only for myself but for the other API actors and filmmakers out there that aren't getting the opportunities they deserve.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Tati. And if you've not already seen it, watch Vincenzo. It's a really good K-drama.
Okay, that's one of my mom's favorites.
It is bonkers. You will love it. It's my favorite K-drama ever. So you will have, it's a roller coaster.
Okay, I'm with it. That's my next one then. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, it's very fun to be talking to you because of Ugly Betty, but that's not a question.
Thank you.
So, with your version of Oliver Queen, you're getting to play this really interesting mix of the more playful, exuberant Oliver Queen and this existential, spiraling Oliver Queen. Was that a highlight of getting to play this character in this story?
Yeah, because I get to go to so many different places, right? Like we get to kind of reboot this character in a new way, which is fun. Setting it in a different time period is really fun and helpful, honestly. And then just getting to play and just be silly and oh so serious, all in the same movie is really special.
So I've been taking acting classes, which is really helpful in doing interviews because I can understand more about what you guys do to play your characters. How did you approach the mix of researching this massive library of stuff that already exists about Oliver Queen versus doing your own creative process of making this character your own?
Well, you know, the research is great and really valuable. And then when you step into actually do the performing, you got to let all of that stuff go. And Wes Gleason, our voice director, was really helpful with that, where then it was just the two of us, you know, playing and experimenting and trying different things, and me feeling safe to just kind of make a choice and go 100%, and if it works, great, or maybe it's a little too far and we'll bring it back, and just, you know, being up for the adventure kind of opens you up to all kinds of really fun things, and I think we found a lot of really fun things in this film.
Well, I enjoyed it. You know, we haven't really gotten to see a lot of Oliver Queen in, let's say, the films, for example, so I was like, oh, finally, a movie with Oliver Queen. So, yeah. Thank you for your time.
I'm such a pleasure. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christopher Berkely. I am the co-director of Batman, The Doom That Came to Gotham. Why did I need to look that up?
It's a long day, lots of press, yeah. So what I wanted to know is, we're hitting an all-time high saturation of superhero media.
Yes.
So what is it about this film that makes it stand out compared to all of the other superhero media that the general audience is perpetually being bombarded with?
Because I'd say with this one is that what makes it different is that it's not necessarily a superhero film. It's more of a movie about our beloved character Batman, and if anything, it's more of a horror film more than a superhero film, which I think makes it stand out a little bit amongst the rank and file of the normal superhero films that are out there. Not to say that he's not being a hero in this, or as he is a superhero, but I think that's how it is different.
One of the things I was curious about is what are the advantages to telling stories for these iconic, well-known characters, specifically in the animation medium?
I think accessibility. I think, maybe this is like an older kind of way of looking at things and stuff like that. But I know for me, a lot of things that influenced me, I saw on TV. Because again, it was very accessible. It's not like I have to because when you go to see a movie, it's like an event, right? But it's different now because there's streaming and stuff like that. So I'm not sure. Maybe everything's moved towards television. In that sense, it casts a wide net as far as exposure is concerned, right? I think a lot of people, even though it starts from comics, I think a lot of people know a lot of characters because of, cartoons, TV series, things like that. So. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and it was just really cool to see more of a horror spin because we don't get a lot of, because horror tends to be an R-rated genre, so we don't get to see a lot of that in live action. So
yeah, I hope people are kind of accepting of it because
I love a good horror adventure romp. Yeah,
because you know how like horror, right? It's especially Lovecraftian horror. Basically, it's just everybody's going to die. It's just how they die and how they get mutilated.
Yeah.
And so, but how do you tell a compelling story with that, right? And I thought, again, the source material. That's what was, I think, at its core, the most interesting for me is that there's a story with Batman, his sacrifice, his what he has to what does he know, what he has to learn, what he has to give up, and as far as thought process, but then also obviously physically, what does he have to sort of give up, and his fate, what does he need to become in order for him to basically save Gotham?
Yes.
So I don't know. Conceptually, again, all these themes really did it for me. But again, it's not your traditional Batman story, where again, even just building this was really difficult because the plot is so complicated, and it's not just, hey, here's the bad guy, we're the good guy, and he did this bad thing, we just go, take him out or whatever, and then the city is saved kind of a thing, right? It's way more like web-like. And so, some of it, might be confusing to people, but again, if you want to dig, I think the answers are there.
So we are at an all-time high saturation of superhero media, largely in live action, but not limited to only live action. So what would you say the advantages are of being able to tell these iconic stories about these big iconic characters, specifically in the animation medium?
Well, I think, you have a very specific, look, you're right, there is an I don't want to say oversaturation because, I work for Warner Brothers.
You don't have to say it, I'll say it.
There's a glut of superhero media out there, which I think is great, and is something if my 12-year-old self knew that this day was going to come, I'd be flipping out. And there's a lot, and I think there's a bit of exhaustion. But I feel like with the DC animated movies, especially, they are targeted for. Hopefully, they're accessible for everyone, but they're targeted more towards the fan base, the hardcore comic fans who are always going to seek it out. And so I think they have that, and they have that background. That they have that sort of base knowledge for the characters that allows something like an Elseworlds story to exist, because you don't have to say, gosh, if I have to see the scene where Batman's parents get shot and the pearls fall onto the ground one more time, you don't have to see that stuff. They know it. You don't have to do any of that stuff, so you could take it and you could take it to the next step.
For my final question, Guillermo del Toro has been in the headlines quite a bit for really being a strong advocate and champion for the animation medium, dispelling misconceptions about animation is only for kids, animation is a lesser art form.
Yeah, God bless Guillermo del Toro.
I love him, and that movie was amazing. It made me cry.
Yeah.
But would you like to share your point of view on that, and just, it might be just reiterating what he already said, but just from your personal and professional experience of really advocating for the animation medium?
I'm definitely all about that. I think it's because I didn't get into animation, that was never on my radar, right? Because again, I'm not into the comical kind of kid stuff, right? But, even though when I started, there was fewer action adventure type of things, but luckily I've been able to sort of steer my career towards these type of things. And again, this is why I stay at Warner Brothers and DC. is because, again, like they allow us to tell these types of stories, right? Because I think even in other studios with just as big names and stuff like that, you can. I feel like the direction is to kidify these stories. You know what I mean? But again, like in these movies, especially, I feel like we're allowed to do something that's like feature. You know what I mean? But and I mean that as far as like we can treat it seriously. You know, and so yeah. So again, it's just like I think it allows a different view and vision of how you consume something, but it can be just as serious, I think just as poignant, I think, as live action, you know?
That's a good question. That's a loaded question. No, that's a great question. And I would say that he was correct in saying that animation isn't just for kids. And ultimately, when you watch a lot of movies, there is a lot of animation going on that you just don't see or notice. You know, with like CGI will replace like the special effects that you see, like just an explosion happening that might have to be crafted in CGI, which is ultimately an animated explosion.
Right, of course.
So there's aspects of animation that are taken for granted,
And
I'm racking my brain now because ultimately, like, I agree with him 1,000%. But I'd say in the States, there's a lot of there is that perception that animation is for kids. Glad you asked this question now, because now I was just thinking about this with a friend of mine. There was a Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's encountering the sheriff of Nottingham, and Bugs Bunny is dressed as the king.
Right.
And he's like, I knight thee, sirloin of beef, you know. And it occurred to me that back then, cartoons were showed in movie theaters for adults.
Right.
It wasn't until the 60s that they got repackaged for children.
Take money.
Yeah, to make money. And now those cartoons are now being used to babysit the children instead of pre-entertainment for adults. So children are actually watching adult entertainment that's not intended for them.
Right.
So I think that's part of one of the stigmas of forgetting the history of animation. Like animation has almost in its infancy been intended originally for adults. So adults go out and appreciate some animation.
I think there's so many talented, mostly writers, but no, there's a lot of talented artists out there who are putting stuff together that is beyond us. I think the general public doesn't understand this. It's not like they're just not exposed to the sophistication. There's a great deal of sophistication. They do think it's for little kids and stuff like that, and it's not. It's not for everybody, you know. But I think there's a level of sophistication that I'm glad people who actually have a voice, like Mr. Del Toro, are championing it, because then it will bring people like my mother-in-law who wouldn't watch, you know, animation. It's like, oh well, maybe I should watch it because I know this. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's great, and I think, you know, animation is a lot in terms of storytelling. It's a lot freer in a lot of ways, you know, both production-wise, budgetarily, and stuff like that. So
yeah.
Hopefully, you know, people like him keep talking. That'll be great.